You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. Today we're going to explore the United States House of Representatives, the People's House. Fortunately, it's not anywhere near as riddled with unspoken rules and unwritten traditions as is the Senate, and in general it tends to be livelier, which can be a good thing at times and maybe not so much at other times. Besides, it currently has Nancy Pelosi in her second term as the first woman Speaker of the House. My special guest today is Congresswoman Val Demings, Democrat of Florida and former House manager for the first impeachment trial of Donald Trump. She's a former police chief, and she's tough and tender and terrific all at the same time. And of course there's Surrealism Corner and Fighting Words, but before we get into any of that, we need to go inside the headlines. The United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate are modeled respectively on the British House of Commons and House of Lords, the latter having longer terms, being originally selected not by popular vote but by each state legislature, and assumed to be further removed from the popular politics of the so-called rabble, thus better insulated to consider great matters of the nation. The U.S. Senate was designed to represent the states, that each state would stand in a relationship of equality with the others. It was an expression of federalism. The U.S. House of Representatives was designed to represent the nation. It was the expression of democracy, representing the people. The House of Representatives is the only branch of government directly elected by American voters since its formation in 1789. In the very first Congress, there were only 65 representatives. The number grew over time as new states joined the country and the population grew. But in 1911, Congress decided the House was getting too big. So they passed a law limiting the number of representatives to 435. The number from each state is determined by the population of the state. The more people who live in the state, the more representatives the state has, except that this does not account for gerrymandering, about which more in a minute. Every state has at least one representative, no matter how small it is. Proportional representation, really the heart of the American Revolution, is where the census becomes vitally important. According to some scholars and historians, since the House's number 435 was developed only in the Reapportionment Act of 1924, there's no reason there can't be more representatives per state. All Congress would need to do, as it did in 1924, is decide on a good number and divide up the congressional districts accordingly. So, as an aside, one change people really might consider when discussing structural change in D.C. would be to enlarge the House, giving the more populous states more power. Still, even as is, direct biennial elections and the size of the membership, currently 435 voting representatives, have made the House receptive to a continual influx of new ideas and priorities that contribute to its long-standing reputation as the People's House. Benjamin Franklin, Pennsylvania delegate to the Constitutional Convention, summed up the desired balance. Quote, "If a proportional representation takes place, the small states contend that their liberties will be in danger. If an equality of votes is to be put in its place, the large states say their money will be in danger. When a broad table is to be made and the edges of planks don't fit, the artist takes a little from both and makes a good joint." Close quote. So did the Great Compromise create a bicameral legislature, enabling the convention, which was teetering on the brink of dissolution, to continue. This in turn relied on the census, which, however, proved highly controversial. Southern delegates argued that their slaves counted in the population, yielding them more representatives, although enslaved persons couldn't vote. Northern delegates countered that slaves were property and should not be counted at all. The result was the notorious 3/5 compromise, where each enslaved person was counted as 3/5 of a free person. The 14th Amendment, ratified after the Civil War, began to remedy this infamous compromise by ordering the census to fully count every male individual, regardless of skin color. All female citizens had to wait for the 19th Amendment in 1920. While the number of House members for each state is determined according to a statistical formula in federal law, each state is responsible for designing the shape of its district so long as it accords with various provisions of the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which seeks to protect racial minorities' voting and representation rights, or used to, but it was gutted recently by the Supreme Court, giving gerrymandering free rein. The Speaker of the House, political and parliamentary leader of that body, is second in line to becoming President of the United States, after the Vice President. The Speaker's position has evolved considerably over time, originating in the British House of Commons during the 14th century, when the Speaker had allegiances to the legislative body as well as to the sovereign. In the 18th century, speakers served as party leaders and ministers of government. The American speakership has grown from being held by regional or party leaders into a powerful post with the authority to appoint members to House standing committees and the authority to control the flow of legislation to the floor. And then, in the 1970s, after reforms limiting committee power, the authority of House speakers re-emerged as the coordination and timing of legislation gained greater importance. The framers initially set 21, the voting age, as the minimum age to serve in the House. During the Federal Constitutional Convention, though, George Mason of Virginia moved to make the age 25, saying there should be a period between being free to manage one's own affairs and managing those of a great nation. The amendment passed. But generally, the Constitution placed few hurdles for an ordinary citizen becoming a member of the House, among them being a U.S. citizen for at least 7 years, living in the same state, though not necessarily the same district represented, and taking an oath to support the Constitution. James Madison wrote, quote, "Under these reasonable limitations, the door of this part of the federal government is open to merit of every description, whether native or adoptive, whether young or old, and without regard to poverty or wealth or to any particular profession of religious faith." Among the special duties mandated for the House of Representatives are that the House has the power to name the president in case of a tie in the Electoral College. While members of Congress are expressly forbidden from being electors, the Constitution requires the House and Senate to count the Electoral College's ballots, and in the event of a tie, select the president and vice president. This was the duty they were performing on January 6th, when the Capitol was besieged. The Constitution gives the House the sole power to impeach an official, and it makes the Senate the sole court for impeachment trials. The power of impeachment is limited to removal from office, but also provides a means by which a removed officer may be disqualified from holding future office. Fines and potential jail time for crimes committed in office are left to the courts. Congress has the power to provide for the common defense and general welfare of the United States, that is, to declare war, to make rules conquering captures on land and water, to raise and support armies, provide and maintain a navy, provide for calling forth the militia to execute the laws of the Union, suppress insurrections, and repel invasions, etc. The framers of the Constitution denied the president authority to go to war unilaterally. For most of U.S. history, the Constitution's checks and balances worked, and more often than not, presidents sought the consent of Congress on war matters. Nevertheless, over time, the executive branch began to assume more and more power in declaring hostilities, fulfilling Madison's dire prediction to Jefferson that, quote, "the executive is a branch of power most interested in war and most prone to it," period, close quote. This power remains a matter of contention and debate since the president is also named Commander-in-Chief of the Army and Navy of the United States and of the militia of the several states when called into the actual service of the United States. The Constitution also mandates that all bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives, although the Senate may propose or concur with amendments as on other bills, then that no money shall be drawn from the Treasury but in consequence of appropriations made by law. Thus, the House is invested with the power of the purse, following the maxim that since the House was more immediately representative of the people were to hold the purse strings. The House of Representatives may determine the rules of its proceedings, punish its members for disorderly behavior, and with the concurrence of 2/3 of members expel a member. In practice, the most severe type of punishment is expulsion, requiring that 2/3 majority vote. Censure and reprimand are imposed by a simple majority vote of the full House. Expulsion has traditionally been reserved for only the most reprehensible conduct or crimes, such as treasonable acts. Indeed, the first 3 individuals expelled from the House had taken up arms for the rebel Confederacy during the Civil War. The House, along with the Senate, has vested in themselves in investigative powers, and the Supreme Court has determined that the framers intended for Congress to seek out information when crafting or reviewing legislation. Such investigations include the powerful tools of subpoena power and of being held in contempt of Congress. In the Federalist No. 52, James Madison of Virginia, who would become the first former House member to later serve as president, wrote, quote, "As it is essential to liberty that the government in general should have a common interest with the people, so it is particularly essential that the branch of it under consideration should have an immediate dependence on and an intimate sympathy with the people." Close quote. Hence, the biennial elections, the shorter terms, and the overall designation as the People's House. Technology has tried to keep pace with that designation. In 1844, Samuel Morse sent the first official telegraph from the Capitol. In 1947, the first live television broadcast from the House chamber took place during the 80th Congress. In 1973, the first electronic vote was lodged in the House of Representatives, and in March 1979, the House inaugurated live, televised, gavel-to-gavel debate on the House floor. No religious test has ever or shall ever be required as a qualification to any office or public trust under the United States of America. It's time for our first break now, but there's lots more coming up, including my conversation with Congresswoman Val Demings and Fighting Words. But right now, you and I are going to pop into the Surrealism Corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, Like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live and visit us at WMClive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
The U.S. House of Representatives might not have traditions quite as ornate as those of the Senate, but they're sufficiently surreal. Due to American Public Law 94-479 by the 94th Congress, George Washington is protected from being outranked by any officer, past, present, and future. Therefore, if there's a 6-star general, Washington automatically is upgraded to 7. The U.S. Congress also voted to pay George Washington $25,000 a year. He declined since he valued his image as a selfless public servant. But ultimately he did accept to avoid a precedent where the presidency would be perceived as being limited to wealthy individuals who could serve without pay. The first former president to serve as a representative was John Quincy Adams. He served as president from 1825 to 1829 and then took office in the House in 1831. The House met in what is now Statuary Hall from 1807 to 1857, when members moved to the modern chamber. Representatives used desks in the House chamber until 1913, when theater-style benches replaced the desks. During the Civil War, the Capitol building briefly was used as a bakery, hospital, and military barracks. The first African-American representative was Joseph Rene, Republican of South Carolina. Born into slavery, taking office in 1870, he also was the first African-American ever to preside over the House. The first woman to serve as a congressional representative was Jeanette Rankin of Montana. A suffragist, Rankin was also the only member of Congress who voted against U.S. entry into both World War I and World War II, claiming that, quote, "As a woman I cannot go to war, and I refuse to send anyone else," close quote. She was mobbed, and she had to hide in a phone booth until congressional police arrived. The first female Speaker of the House, of course, is Nancy Pelosi, Democrat of California. First elected to the speakership in 2007, she was re-elected in 2019. 30 multi-million-dollar American corporations spent more money lobbying Congress than they paid in federal income taxes between 2008 and 2010, ultimately spending approximately $400,000 every day, including weekends, during that 3-year period, to lobby lawmakers and influence elections. The word Idaho is completely meaningless. The lobbyist who suggested the name lied about it being a Shoshone word for gem of the mountains, and Congress just never bothered verifying the claim. Another lobbying story for you. Disney successfully lobbied Congress to extend the length of copyright protection in order to prevent Mickey Mouse from entering the public domain. The law was later referred to as the Mickey Mouse Protection Act. In 1927, several million people in the United States sent over 100,000 petitions backed by the Metric Association and the General Federation of Women's Clubs, urging Congress to adopt the metric system. The petition, however, was opposed by the manufacturing industry, which cited the cost of conversion. In 1954, at the urging of President Eisenhower, Congress added the phrase, "under God," to the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. This was during the Cold War and the McCarthy era, and was intended to symbolize resistance to communists who were atheists. The pledge originally had been written in the wake of the Civil War in August 1892 by the socialist minister Francis Bellamy, and Bellamy's granddaughter strongly objected to the insertion "under God" in 1954. Members of the House can introduce legislation by placing it in a box called the hopper, attached to the side of the clerk's desk on the House podium. The name is derived from a storage bin that holds grain or coal. The hopper has been used in the House since the 19th century. Since 1904, the cafeteria at the U.S. House of Representatives have served bean soup on a daily basis, all of the cafeterias there. In finding that it had been eliminated from the menu on a hot day, Speaker of the House, Joseph Cannon of Illinois, started the tradition when he declared that bean soup should be served every day, regardless of weather. And that, though it's a very minor item, is one that's truly surreal. It's time for another break, but I'll be back right away with Congresswoman Val Demings, who you will remember as an impeachment manager from the first trial of Donald Trump. And wow, as a former police chief herself, does she have interesting things to say about the second trial. So don't go away. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
My special guest today is Congresswoman Val Demings, who is the representative for Florida's 10th Congressional District since 2017. It's the area that covers much of Orlando, Florida's resort parks. She was the first woman to lead the Orlando Police Department, capping a 27-year career with the department. She became interested in law enforcement after serving in school patrol at DuPont Junior High School, attended Florida State University, graduating with a degree in criminology in 1979, and then working as a state social worker in Jacksonville. She is a member of the New Democrat Coalition and the Congressional Black Caucus. She serves on the Committee on the Judiciary, the Subcommittee on Crime, Terrorism, Homeland Security, and Investigations, where she's the vice chair. And she has received a 100% voting score from NARAL Pro-Choice America, a 70% rating from the American Civil Liberties Union, and an F rating from the NRA. So here, with delight, is Val Demings. Congresswoman Demings, welcome to the program. I'm very honored to have you here.
Well, thank you so much. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Well, I'm going to plunge right in. You, of course, were famously a police chief for the Orlando Police Department, the first woman, yay, to lead the department, capping a 27-year career with the department. And you, while there, you oversaw a 40% decrease in violent crime, decrease. And you also famously wrote in an op-ed that looking for a negative story in a police department is like looking for a prayer in church. It's easily found. So those two things said, what do we do given the fact that we're still in the wake of the Capitol siege by white supremacists and supremacists of every sort, and given the way that police departments seem to disproportionately attract a certain kind of guy. And given the fact that there were in recent years found in police or police-related agencies in Virginia, Nebraska, Louisiana, Michigan, Texas, and Florida, though not in your bailiwick, all fired officers who were members of the Ku Klux Klan. What do we do about that? Simple, small question.
Well, I really do appreciate. No, well, you know what? I spent, as you've indicated, 27 years at the Orlando Police Department. Prior to becoming a law enforcement officer, I served as a social worker. So when I went to the police department, I took my social worker's heart with me, realizing that it is impossible to arrest our way out of every issue that we will face, but also wanted to keep my community safe.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. One of the main focuses when I had the honor of serving as chief of police was on hiring and recruiting. Number one, I truly believe that police departments should reflect the diversity of the communities in which they serve. How important is that? And that diversity should be reflected along all rank levels, which means the people making the decisions should also look like the community. And so the police department, just like, unfortunately, so many organizations, they're made up of people from the world, if you will. And so while you can, have the best efforts to recruit the brightest and the best, people who also know how to police with their brains and their heart, unfortunately, all too often, as we've seen, many people make their way in the door who should have never been law enforcement officers in the first place. At OPD, we had a policy that if the policy basically said you could not associate in any form with any anti-racist, white supremacist, any type of group, because doing so was an automatic reason for dismissal. And so, it's very sad what we saw on January 6th. I was there in the Capitol during the time going through that horrible experience with my colleague, staff, and Capitol employees. And let me say this. Yeah, I served in law enforcement for a lot of years, but anyone who participated, any officer, any firefighter, any other public servant, any state legislator, any president of the United States or U.S. senator, they all should be held accountable. And I think we're on a good track to them being held accountable.
That's very encouraging. I mean, it seems to me that culpability and responsibility goes all the way up, and that members of Congress who voted to stop the democratic process that was taking place should be also held culpable. In
that
every
has
way.
been, and a lot of what happened on January 6th, I'll never forget it, and many other people, even some of those who just watched it from a distant place, will never forget it. But I got to tell you, what has been extremely hard to move past, in addition to January 6th, are the 140-something members of the U.S. House of Representatives who basically voted to overturn an election.
That's
now,
collaboration,
look,
isn't that collaboration?
In our political parties, we usually take our corners and we fight hard, right, for our guy or our girl.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, when all the votes are counted, there's one person standing, and we all kind of dust it off and get to work. And so the fact that these members of Congress, and many of them, their congressional oath was not the only oath they'd taken. Some of them served in the military, some as military commanders, some as in law enforcement, as sheriffs and other top positions. Wasn't the first oath they'd taken. And so they knew better. When you know better, you're supposed to do better. Yeah. And so I'm still trying to figure out really how to deal with them in terms of moving forward with legislation, because you can support your guy or girl, but at the end of the day, don't try to overthrow our government or overturn a fair election.
Yeah. Is it legislation? Is it censure? Is it reprimand? I mean, What is available within the near, not for 50-year long future to the American public?
I really wish, when I ran for Congress, it took me a long time to decide to run, but basically I came to the conclusion that if we're going to change what we don't like, then we've got to change the kind of people that we send.
Yeah.
And so long term, I just want us to get to a place where, and I think President Obama said it. He said, we're not red states, we're not blue states, we are the United States. When the issues will mean more, when taking care of individuals in this country and their needs and their children and their families will mean more than any particular party. So I think the long-term goal, we got to send better people who take an oath and will stand by that oath.
Yeah, yeah.
But number two, we've considered a lot. I mean, there've been talk about censure. It doesn't seem to me censure is enough.
Yeah.
But, I really don't know, Rob. I really don't know what the answer is. We're still trying to work through it. We have multiple investigations that are currently going on. Of course, the Senate Appropriations Committee doing interviews right now, as we on Capitol Hill, looking at January 6th and those who are in charge. So we got a long way to go. And hopefully at the end of those investigations, we'll know where we need to go from here.
Yeah, I hope so, because we're counting on you. You were fabulous, famous and fabulous and other good things as a member of what we're now calling first impeachment of Donald Trump as one of the House managers. What did you think of the second one? And do you think that they should have pushed harder, or did they pushed enough, or what do you think?
Well, let me say, first of all, it was an honor for me to serve as an impeachment manager in the first impeachment of the same president.
Yeah.
I am so proud, though, of the impeachment managers in the second trial. Just looking at them, when we talk about representing America, they represented America.
Yeah.
And I think they presented a clear and convincing case where the evidence was overwhelming. I think about the first impeachment trial where we had to spend a significant amount of time really trying to recreate that phone call between President Trump and President Zelensky, and help the American people clearly understand that he tried to use much needed military aid to coerce, or withholding that aid to coerce, the Ukrainian president into interfering in our election. In the second impeachment trial, the evidence was all around us. I mean, I don't know if there's any person in this country who has not seen the video footage, who has not heard the president's own words inciting the riot, inciting the attack, inciting the insurrection, and then his lackluster response once he was clearly notified that all hell had broken loose at the Capitol. It was pretty clear, and I think the impeachment managers did a good job of just telling that story over and over again. It was clear and convincing. 57-43 wasn't bad, all things considered.
Yeah.
It was, of course, the most bipartisan vote in an impeachment trial.
Right.
Of course, it did not reach the threshold, but it wasn't because the managers didn't do their part. They didn't.
For those of us who are out here,
job.
and just for those of us who are civilians in all of this, it was astonishing because it was so in your face, and because the jury were also witnesses. I mean, they had felt the surge of adrenaline fear in their own hearts.
They were running for. To imagine sitting there as a juror, and the impeachment managers are presenting footage of you running for your life.
Yeah.
During the insurrection, you getting on the phone, calling the president, saying, call him off. And Mitch McConnell's own words, of course, after he voted that the president was not guilty, he then took the lectern and talked about how the president was clearly responsible, very guilty, and there were remedies to deal with him.
Yeah, there's a little
so
cognitive dissonance there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, Congresswoman, you are an amazement on many fronts. I'm so grateful that you're there. I have heard rumors, however, that your eyes are set on other office, and I hope that's true too, either gubernatorial or senatorial, because I hope that you have, and I'm sure you will, a long and distinguished and shining career ahead of you in statewide and in national office. Your performance during the first impeachment trial and your performance in general has heartened all of us, and you stand at the perfect inflection point, it seems to me, between law enforcement, discipline, law-abiding citizenry, and mercy and vision and empathy with the citizenry. And very few people stand at that particular moment. So I want you to know that we think we need you.
Well, thank you so much. And I have to say that I have just had a ton of people reach out to me about running for higher office. I always remind them that there is plenty of work to do in the House of Representatives, and we'll see what the future holds. But I do remember my oath, and I intend, as long as I am in office, to abide by it.
Oh,
so
boy. And wow, is that ever comforting? Somebody who abides by her oath. What a concept. Thank you so much, and thank you for being with us today. I'm very grateful. Stay safe.
Well, thank you so much. You take care.
It's time for our final break, but then I'll be right back with some fighting words.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, it's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Talk radio with a brain.
Noticing detail can constitute fighting words. I once inveighed against the American system of government, longing instead for the parliamentary system, which permitted the bringing down of an administration whenever enough support for that could be mustered. But I've come to greatly appreciate the subtle decisions made by the framers of the Constitution as to checks and balances in every direction, on every level. With all their faults, these guys had a taste for nuance, unto the small details. For example, when the U.S. Constitution was written, the British prevented anyone born outside England or its empire from serving in the lower house, the House of Commons, even if the individual had subsequently become a citizen, and forget about the upper house, the House of Lords. By mandating that an individual be a citizen for at least 7 years, the American founders attempted to strike a balance between preventing foreign interference in domestic politics on one hand and keeping the House of Representatives close to the people on the other. But the founders also didn't want to discourage immigration to the new country by shutting off the government to new arrivals. Balance. Here's another example. The American Revolution was, in part, a contest about the very definition of representation. In England, the House of Commons represented every British subject, regardless of whether the subject could actually vote for its membership. In this sense, most people living in areas under British rule, including North America, were only virtually represented in Parliament. American colonists, accustomed to controlling their local affairs in directly elected colonial legislatures, resented British policies imposed on them, such as London imposing taxes without the benefit of a voice in Parliament. Thus they rallied behind the motto, "No taxation without representation." Representation was closely linked to taxation. Before federal income taxes or tariffs, the states contributed to the national government with local taxes, often flat poll taxes on each citizen. Since constitutional framers had to provide for funding the new government, they debated the proper relationship between representation and taxation. Several delegates argued that geographic size, or usable farmland, were better measures of state wealth than population. Delegates, however, settled on proportional contributions based on population and, by extension, the number of members in the House of Representatives. Large states with more human capital should contribute more revenue to the national government and also have more seats in the legislature as a result. This fulfilled the promise of the American Revolution: taxation with representation. Then there are term lengths. English parliamentary elections and meetings of the House of Commons varied between 3 and 7-year terms, but elections and meetings were set by the members themselves and often were tied to the demands of the king. American convention delegates argued heatedly about the terms of service for House members, and the founders employed their experiences with the House of Commons and with state legislatures when designing the new federal government. Two innovations to further democratic accountability separated the American and British experiences. The first was fixed terms of office. Unlike in parliamentary systems, American political parties could not call advantageous elections whenever political leaders thought they'd be most likely to win. Instead, elections would be held according to a given length of time. The second innovation was regular elections. 1- and 3-year terms of service were initially proposed. Proponents of the 1-year term used their state legislatures as an example, while proponents of the 3-year term followed the British example. Framers who favored longer terms argued that it would help the Senate track the democratic impulses of the House. Remember that the French Revolution had just occurred with all its bloody excesses, and these men were highly alarmed at the thought of mob rule, as our own recent experience with populist demagoguery and mob insurrection demonstrate. James Madison suggested a term of 7 or 9 years to hamper such influences. Alexander Hamilton argued that only lifetime terms, remember, these are for the Senate, could keep the, quote, amazing violence and turbulence of the democratic spirit, close quote, in check. But others wanted shorter terms to keep the Senate accountable. The convention settled on 2-year terms for the House as a compromise between the 1- and 3-year factions. Frequent elections in the House also helped to justify the longer terms of senators, particularly for Federalists who were concerned about popular opinion swaying public policy and who faced attacks for creating a so-called aristocratic chamber in Congress, the Senate, to represent state interests. But there was yet another reason for the 2-year term in the House. It had to do with humility for House members, with their staying in touch with the people they represented. James Madison wrote in Federalist No. 57, quote, "The House of Representatives is so constituted as to support in the members an habitual recollection of their dependence on the people. Before the sentiments impressed on their minds by the mode of their elevation can be effaced by the exercise of power, they will be compelled to anticipate the moment when their power is to cease, when their exercise of it is to be reviewed, and when they must descend to the level from which they were raised, therefore ever to remain unless a faithful discharge of their trust shall have established their title to a renewal of it." Period, close quote. All in all, with the exception perhaps of the Electoral College invention, for which a remedy does exist, A pretty amazing system of pure conceptual genius. That was the American experiment. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag Fighting Words. And that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.